I wanted a new headboard that looks something like this or this, but these are no longer available. I found antique French door panels, but I need two. Spending $1,700 to $3,000 plus shipping wasn't in my budget, so I decided to build it myself. There was one problem. It would be huge and impossible to move, so my solution was to attach it permanently and make it a feature of the room. So far, I've demoed old trim, built columns, installed the entablature, and added mirrors. Join me as I figure out how to create the look of doors and see if I can get this headboard wrapped up and painted this week. So this part that I'm working on doesn't really, these pieces don't have names. It's not any sort of classical design. I kind of want it to look like a door. I just took a few different photos for inspiration and created my own design. Now, I think I've mentioned that the mirrors weren't cut perfectly square. I'm going to solve that issue by putting a small piece of trim just over the edges of the mirror. But I might do that last since I haven't decided on paint color yet. And the edge of that piece is going to be reflected back, so you're going to see the back of the piece. So I don't want to put it up before I paint it. I was waiting to get those pieces up to measure this, just so it'd be more accurate. We're going to have to figure out what to do. There is a lovely outlet cover there, so we have to work around that also. So this makes it more challenging here. We've got to notch this out so that the trim will sit flush. And I'm just going to mark it. Mark the top and bottom, that is. Let me get my favorite ruler. Just find the depth of that and then transfer it on. Although I did use the wrong side. This side has a pencil notch, but. So this small portion here is what we are going to route out. So I just clamped a piece of clamped another piece of trim. They're made out of MDF, so MDF has pretty straight edges. And then just using the flush trim bit, I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. Here's what that looks like. The router only does curved edges, so I'll need to chisel those corners out. And then I brought these pieces that I routed out in. I failed to notice there's another notch that needs to be made. The plinth block down here also needs to be notched out. So let's also mark that and take it back outside to route. And I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, this is nice and routed and chiseled to fit now. This piece as well. This one is a better fit. I like to push on them to see if they move. If they do, put another nail in. And make sure all the nails are flush again. Using a router and a circle guide, I cut 2 large circles from plywood. And there's the first medallion. Then I used some different bits on the router to cut some grooves and add design to the circles. And then I'm going to go back and use some round over bits. I'm going to use this one on the edge. I'm not sure what it's called. I also cut out 2 arches again using the circle guide and the router. The second one, I had already cut the middle of the circle out, so I didn't have a center point to pivot around. So I just traced this shape here. You can see the pencil line. And then I used the jigsaw to cut pretty close. So I just nailed it together. I didn't want to take any chances of it slipping and moving. Can fill those later with wood filler. Okay, I just finished routing those. Those are a perfect match. I'm going to pry them apart and put some round over on the edges. So I went ahead and decided that I was going to add an extension on here. I'm just going to build this sort of frame. Got these pieces cut and dry fit. just trim this one down. So what I need to do now also, this is part of the trim I just cut off the flat part. And that's what's going to wrap around this, since this is just going to act as the flat part. So I need to cut an angle, but not all the way down, a 45. And then this is how I set up, basically, to turn the full molding into just this decorative part. Okay, let's dry fit this together. And then, so excited. So we got all these pieces dry fit. So the last piece to cut is right here. I'll mark that. It's actually right here. I think that makes sense. Let's nail it in place. So this is the one little issue I'm having with the trim that was already on the ceiling. When I moved in, this trim here was already here. So it's not flush, and I didn't like the gap here. So I added a tiny little piece of trim to help fill that gap in. And the problem is I can't just put a straight piece of molding here because of the variation in the ceiling. So this is the little piece of trim that I'm using. I drew two sort of diagrams, 22.5 degree cut and a 22.5 degree cut here to make 45 degrees. This little guy in the, so you can see there's 22.5. And then I can continue that piece of trim, and this mark here just needs to be straight. So I'm going to go sort of stick that up there and mark it. The thing I don't like about these is that the plate isn't flat, so this rocks back and forth. There is the profile of the ceiling, one for each side. I also glued these up. It is time to install the medallions. Just went to check to see if the little tiny trim pieces were dry, and I got paint all over my fingers, mostly there. It is time for the last piece of trim to go up. Because this is so delicate, I'm not going to nail it. I'm just going to use some Alex caulking and some blue tape to hold it up. I've already put a laser line up so that I can make sure it's nice and straight and vertical. So let me point out here that I am using a 2.5 inch angle trim brush, the short handle. I find that the longer handles are super fatiguing because you have to hold that extra weight in your hand. I'm using the angle because of all of the crevices that I have to get into here. Let's just pause for a quick look. Ooh, look at the difference. Look how rich that looks. Oh, I think it's beautiful. The last thing that we're going to do for the headboard is add some gallery rails. I found this hardware on vintagehardware.com, not sponsored. Ordered 5 brass rails, the pass-throughs, ends, and corners. So I'm going to put this on the top of the shelf. This is the little cutter I'm using for the brass rails to cut it. It has a nice sharp blade in there, so you just kind of clamp it down and spin it around. They're already marked out the middle, and we're just going to drill a small pilot hole there. Okay, that works better.
cut the last little piece. See if we can finesse it to go in here. All right, as long as we don't touch anything.
After 5 months, the headboard is complete, and here it is. Be sure to check back in if you want to see the rest of my bedroom makeover. And thanks for watching.